No pulleys. No cranes. So how do you move the weight of a tank across a desert? The sledge system. Ancient wall paintings, like the famous scene in the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, show hundreds of workers dragging massive statues on wooden sledges. For decades, historians looked at these paintings and dismissed them. They thought they were symbolic, that dragging 80 tons across sand was physically impossible due to the friction. They assumed the artists were leaving out some secret technology. The Egyptians developed a sophisticated Nile transportation system. They didn't just use whatever boats they had lying around. They built heavy-duty wooden barges specifically designed to distribute the weight of 50-ton stones. Deep-water ports along the riverbanks. Artificial canals leading directly from the Nile to the foot of the Giza Plateau. Timing was everything. They utilized the flood season, or Ake. When the Nile flooded, the water levels rose significantly, allowing deep-draft barges to float much closer to the plateau than during the dry season. By digging canals that reached the very base of the Giza cliff, they could unload the stones almost exactly where they were needed. This reduced the grueling land transport from miles, to just a few hundred yards. For thousands of years, we had the pyramids, but we didn't have the paperwork. Critics argued that without written records, we were just guessing. That changed in 2013. Archaeologists working at the ancient Red Sea port of Wadi al-Jarf discovered a collection of ancient papyri. These are now known as the mirror papyri, and they are the smoking gun of Egyptian archaeology. These documents belonged to a man named Mirror. He wasn't a king or a priest, he was an official, an elite project manager overseeing the transport of stone. The internal spiral ramp theory proposed by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, this theory has revolutionized Egyptology. It suggests the Egyptians used a short external ramp for the base, but then built the rest using an internal spiral ramp tucked just behind the outer casing. Supporting evidence. Internal corridors. Thermal scans have revealed L-shaped anomalies at the corners, exactly where workers would have needed open spaces to turn the 2.5-ton blocks. Structural voids. Modern muon tomography has detected large, hidden voids that match the path of a spiraling internal corridor. This theory solves the height problem and the ramp removal problem simultaneously. The ramp wasn't a temporary addition, it was part of the internal design. Many Egyptologists now consider this the most plausible solution to how the factory of death became a stairway to heaven. Before the first stone was even laid, the Giza plateau had to be perfectly flat. The Egyptians didn't have laser levels, so they used the most reliable tool in nature, water. Archaeologists believe they likely dug a grid of shallow trenches into the bedrock and filled them with water. Because water always finds level, it provided a perfect, horizontal reference point. They simply marked the water line on the sides of the trenches and chipped away the excess rock until the entire 13-acre foundation was as flat as a sheet of glass. Once the foundation was set, they used plumb lines, weighted strings to ensure every wall was perfectly vertical. Straight edges, long wooden rods to check the flatness of the surfaces. A-frame levels, wooden triangles with a weighted string to verify horizontal accuracy. When a block arrived at its final destination, the masons would fine-tune the edges. Recent research suggests they might have used a slurry of liquid gypsum and sand as a lubricant to slide the massive stones into their final resting place. Mortar was used only as a filler, not structural support. Unlike a modern brick wall where the mortar acts as the glue, the Great Pyramid is held together by its own mass. The mortar was simply a thin layer used to help level out minor imperfections and seal the joints against moisture. Once the stone was positioned, gravity did the rest. The weight of the stone above locked the stone below into an eternal grip. The pyramid is the ultimate, low-maintenance machine. Its longevity comes from three key factors. Wide base. The massive footprint ensures the pressure is spread out over a huge surface area, preventing the structure from sinking into the bedrock. Narrowing shape. As the building goes up, the weight decreases. This means the most vulnerable part of the building, the top, is also the lightest. Weight distributed downward. every stone pushes down on the one below it, creating a self-healing structure. If an earthquake shakes the ground, the stones settle even more firmly into place rather than crumbling. While a vertical wall wants to tip over when the earth moves, a pyramid wants to sit still. The pyramid shape is one of the most stable forms ever discovered. It is, in many ways, the closest a human structure can get to being a natural mountain. Nature approves it. The Egyptians didn't just understand the Nile, they understood the laws of the universe. They knew that if you align yourself with the stars, use the physics of water, and build with the stability of the earth, you can create something that is truly immortal. They are a standard to be met. They are a challenge issued by the ancient world to the modern one, we built for eternity. What are you building for? The Great Pyramid didn't appear overnight. It was the result of a monumental commitment that spanned an entire generation. Based on archaeological evidence and historical records, the structure likely took 20 to 25 years to complete. 20,000 to 30,000 workers at its peak. When you break down the math, it reveals a staggering reality. To meet this timeline, the workforce had to be, roughly one block placed every few minutes, every hour of the day, for over 2 decades. This was not impossible. It was simply relentlessly organized. Stone by stone. Day by day. Year by year. They moved an entire mountain of limestone and granite by sheer human will. The original entrance to the Great Pyramid is not the low, jagged opening used by tourists today, known as the Robber's Tunnel. The true entryway is located high on the north face. Carefully concealed by the original casing stones. Perfectly aligned with true north. This positioning was not for decoration or architectural flair, it was a feat of precision. Why the north? In ancient Egyptian theology, the northern sky held the highest honor. The circumpolar stars, those that never set below the horizon, were considered the imperishable ones. Because they never died in the west, they were the ultimate symbol of eternity. A steep, narrow corridor descends over 300 feet, plunging deep into the solid limestone bedrock beneath the pyramid's base. This passage is a marvel of ancient surveying. It is angled at exactly 26 degrees. Perfectly straight for its entire length. Carved with extreme accuracy, with a deviation of less than a fraction of an inch. Intriguingly, no torches were found in the form of soot on the ceilings. This suggests the builders worked using reflected sunlight from a series of bronze mirrors or used oil lamps carefully controlled to avoid smoke damage to the pristine stone. The unfinished chamber at the very bottom lies a rough, jagged room known as the unfinished chamber. Why was it abandoned? Some believe it was a design change as the pharaoh's reign lasted longer than expected, while others suggest structural reconsideration or a symbolic purpose meant to represent the primordial chaos of the underworld. Even here, at the lowest point, the mystery remains. Breaking sharply upward from the descending corridor is a second path. This isn't an accident, it is a profound architectural and spiritual statement. This is deliberate. This is symbolic. In the Egyptian journey of the afterlife, the soul descends, then rises. Granite blocking stones at the base of this ascending passage, the Egyptians left behind a final, formidable defense, 3 massive granite plugs. Each of these blocks weighs several tons and was meticulously carved to fit the dimensions of the corridor exactly. These were designed to slide into place after the pharaoh's burial. Seal the pyramid permanently from the inside. The king's chamber is built entirely of red Aswan granite. While the rest of the pyramid is limestone, this room is a fortress of the hardest stone available. These granite blocks weigh up to 80 tons each. The ceiling alone is composed of 9 massive beams that have supported the weight of the mountain above for over 4 millennia. Granite cannot be cut easily with copper, yet these blocks fit together with surgical precision. The sarcophagus at the far end sits the granite sarcophagus. It is a mystery in itself. It is too large to fit through the corridors leading into the room. This means it must have been placed during construction, before the roof was even added. Curiously, it has no lid and shows signs of being hollowed out with tubular drills. The fact that the sarcophagus is wider than the entrance proves that the king's chamber was planned and equipped long before the pyramid was sealed. Directly above the king's chamber lie 5 hidden, stacked cavities discovered in the 19th century. These are not burial rooms or secret treasuries, they are the pyramid's insurance policy. Their purpose: to divert millions of tons of weight away from the flat ceiling of the king's chamber below. To channel the immense pressure of the pyramid's apex into the surrounding core. This is advanced structural engineering. Even modern skyscrapers use similar principles to manage load-bearing stress. The Great Pyramid encodes astonishing mathematics, numbers that many believe weren't officially discovered until centuries later. Pi and phi. First, let's look at the ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height. If you divide the perimeter of the base by twice its height, the result is approximately 3.14, the value of pi, $/pi. Additionally, the golden ratio, $/phi, appears repeatedly in the relationship between the slant height and the half base. Did the Egyptians know these constants by name? Most academics believe they may not have named them in the way we do today, but they clearly understood their relationships. By using a measuring wheel or a standard drum to calculate distance, these ratios would have emerged naturally as part of their geometry. To achieve this, the Egyptians used a standardized measurement system based on the royal cubit. 1 cubit is approximately 52.3 centimeters. It was further divided into 7 palms, which were subdivided into 4 fingers. The entire pyramid follows this system with incredible consistency. From the dimensions of the king's chamber to the length of the descending passage, the builders weren't just guessing. They were following a strict mathematical blueprint that ensured every stone fit into a larger, cosmic puzzle. The pyramid was not built randomly. You cannot just start stacking stones and hope for the best when you are building the tallest structure on Earth. It required a construction sequence so rigid that a single delay in the supply chain could have derailed the entire project. They might have followed down steps. Leveling the bedrock, using water-filled trenches to create a perfect foundation. Laying the base, setting the cornerstones with astronomical precision. Building the core, using local limestone to rapidly gain height. Installing internal chambers, the granite king's chamber had to be built while the pyramid grew around it. You couldn't insert it later. Raising upper levels, transitioning from large blocks to smaller ones as the space became cramped. Applying casing stones, fitting the Tura limestone from the top down to create that final, mirror-like finish. Everything had to be planned in advance. There was no room for error. If the internal passages were off by even a few inches during the middle phase, the king's chamber wouldn't have fit. The Great Pyramid is proof that the ancient Egyptians were masters of project management long before the modern era. The question is, where did the mummy go from Great Pyramid of Giza? No mummy was ever found. There were no golden masks, no ornate grave goods, and no piles of treasure. When Caliph al-Ma'mun finally breached the king's chamber in the 9th century, he found only an empty stone box. This lack of a royal resident has fueled thousands of theories. Possible explanations include: looted in antiquity, robbers may have entered through hidden passages long before recorded history, stripping the chamber of its riches. Body removed by priests. During times of political unrest, priests often moved royal mummies to secret caches to protect them from desecration. Symbolic burial. Some suggest the Great Pyramid was a cenotaph, and Khufu was buried elsewhere in a hidden, still undiscovered location. However, we must remember that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. For some, the explanation of royal tomb isn't enough. The sheer scale, the astronomical alignments, the unexplained features, it all feels like there should be more to it. Some propose power plants, generating some unknown ancient energy. Energy generators, harnessing telluric currents or cosmic rays. Initiation temples, sites for ancient, secret rituals. The human imagination loves a grand mystery, and the pyramids certainly provide one. But while these theories are captivating, the hard evidence points in a much more grounded, yet equally profound, direction. Evidence, both archaeological and textual, overwhelmingly favors royal tombs with deep religious symbolism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so far, none has appeared to support the more fantastical theories. But to truly understand how the pyramids were built, that we must understand the society that built them, its politics, its economy, and its singular, all-consuming obsession with eternity. Because the stones tell one story, but the daily lives of the people tell another. Ancient Egypt wasn't just a kingdom, it was a theocracy. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a living god, the embodiment of Horus, and the bridge between the human and divine worlds. This belief system was the bedrock of the entire society. The pharaoh's journey into the afterlife wasn't just his personal concern, it was a matter of national security. If the pharaoh failed to make his transition to the Akh, the immortal spirit, the cosmic order would break down. The Nile might not flood, the sun might not rise, and chaos would consume Egypt. The pyramid, then, was not merely a tomb but a colossal insurance policy. It was a machine designed to guarantee the pharaoh's safe passage, ensuring the continued prosperity and stability of the entire Egyptian cosmos. Every worker, from the lowliest farmer to the chief architect, believed they were contributing to this sacred mission. What truly powered the construction of the pyramids, was it strength in stone, or something far more essential that held an entire civilization together? So, if the driving force was religious belief, what was the physical fuel? It wasn't just strength. It wasn't just slaves. It was food. Lots and lots of food. Feeding 20,000 to 30,000 workers, day in and day out, for 2 decades, was a logistical challenge on par with the construction itself. Every day, these workers consumed a staggering amount of provisions. Bread, the staple food, often eaten in huge quantities. Beer, not the strong alcoholic drink we know today, but a thick, low-alcohol, high-calorie brew packed with nutrients. It was a liquid bread, safe to drink, and a crucial source of energy and hydration. Onions and fish, providing essential vitamins and protein. Archaeological digs at the worker city near Giza have unearthed enormous quantities of animal bones. We're talking thousands of remains of cattle, sheep, and goats. Analysis shows that these were prime cuts, the kind of meat typically reserved for the elite. This was incredibly expensive. This level of sustenance proves that these were not slaves forced to subsist on scraps. These were highly valued, well-fed laborers. Only a powerful, centralized state with an incredibly efficient agricultural system and a sophisticated bureaucracy could afford to divert such a massive amount of high-quality food to a single project. Think about the infrastructure required: vast farms across Egypt dedicated to growing grain, massive bakeries operating around the clock, breweries churning out thousands of liters of beer daily, and a network of administrators ensuring constant supply to the Giza Plateau. This was the ancient world's first true mega-project, in terms of logistics and resource management. The pyramids, then, are not just monuments to stone. They are monuments to human organization, to the power of a shared belief, and to the astonishing ability of a society to feed, house, and motivate tens of thousands of people for generations to achieve a single, extraordinary goal. The real mystery isn't how they moved the stones. It's how they moved an entire nation. When we think of the Great Pyramid, we look up at the apex, 481 feet in the air. We think of kings and gods. But the true story of the pyramids isn't found at the top, it's found in the dirt, just a few hundred yards to the south. This is Height El Europe. To the casual observer, it looks like a pile of mud bricks. But to archaeologists, it is the smoking gun. This was not a temporary camp or a collection of shacks. It was a highly sophisticated, planned city built specifically to house the most elite workforce in the ancient world. For decades, we were told the pyramids were built by thousands of slaves living in misery. Height El Europe destroys that narrative stone by stone. This city was laid out with the precision of a modern military base. What was found there? Archaeologists discovered a massive urban complex that included dormitories, long, gallery-style buildings capable of housing up to 2,000 workers at a time. Streets, a structured grid system that allowed for the efficient movement of people. Kitchens and bakeries, massive industrial-scale facilities. We found thousands of bread molds, conical clay pots used to bake the heavy, nutritious loaves that fueled the construction. Breweries, because in Egypt, beer was liquid gold, a safe, calorie-dense source of hydration. Medical facilities, this is perhaps the most shocking find of all. The workers didn't just sleep here, they lived here in organized groups. They weren't a chaotic mob. They were rotated in shifts, managed by a massive bureaucracy, and, most importantly, they were cared for. How did ancient Egypt manage to provide consistent medical care to thousands of laborers over decades of pyramid construction? If you were a slave in the ancient world and you became too injured to work, you were often discarded. But the skeletons found in the Giza cemeteries tell a different story. The bones of these workers show healed fractures, perfectly set arm and leg bones that show months of healing. Treated spinal injuries, evidence of long-term care for workers who performed heavy lifting. Evidence of surgery, we have found skulls that underwent successful brain surgery, trepanation, where the bone actually grew back, meaning the patient lived for years afterward. A worker who broke his leg on the Giza plateau was not left to die. He was carried to a physician, his bone was set, and he was fed while he recovered. That level of investment in a human being alone destroys the slave myth. You don't perform surgery on disposable labor. You don't perform surgery on disposable labor. You perform it on a valued specialist. Building a pyramid is essentially a giant puzzle, and no one built it alone. The workforce was a masterpiece of division of labor. To move 2.3 million stones, the Egyptians broke the task down into highly specialized units. Quarry workers, the specialists who knew exactly where to strike the limestone to make it crack perfectly. Transport teams, the haulers, who mastered the physics of sledges and wet sand. Ramp builders, the engineers who spent their lives calculating inclines and structural stability. Stone setters, the elite masons who used plumb bobs and squares to ensure submillimeter precision. Surveyors and scribes, the white-collar workers who tracked every block, every ration of bread, and every man-hour. It was industrial-scale labor, 4,500 years ago. Each group had a leader, a specific quota, and a rigid schedule. They were divided into fills, or gangs, often competing against one another. We know this because they left graffiti on the stones, bragging about their team's speed and strength. So, why did they do it? Why did tens of thousands of people leave their homes every year during the flood season to haul stones in the sun? It wasn't just for the bread and the beer. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was the bridge between the gods and the people. Building his stairway to heaven wasn't just a job, it was a religious duty that guaranteed the sun would keep rising and the Nile would keep flooding. They weren't building a tomb for a man. They were building an anchor for the universe. The workers' city proves that the Great Pyramid wasn't built by a tyrant's whip, it was built by the collective will of an entire nation. The greatest puzzle isn't the pyramid, it's the mastery of time, quality, and coordination required to build something this enormous. We see a static monument. But for the people living in 2500 BC, this was a living, breathing project. It was a race against the clock, governed by the heartbeat of the earth itself. To build the tallest structure in the world, the Egyptians didn't just master stone, they mastered time. Contrary to popular belief, the pyramids were not built in a state of chaotic, year-round grinding. If you worked 30,000 men to death in the heat of a desert summer without a plan, the project would have collapsed in months. Instead, the building of Giza followed the rhythmic, seasonal cycles of the Nile. The Nile flood advantage every year, the Nile River would swell, flooding the agricultural plains of Egypt. This was called archae. To any other civilization, this would be a disaster, the loss of all farmland for months. But the Egyptians turned this natural limitation into their greatest strategic advantage. During the flooding, farming stopped, the entire peasant workforce was suddenly available. Workers were free, instead of sitting idle, the state mobilized them as part of a labor tax, feeding them from royal granaries. Transport was easiest, this is the genius of their timing. The high waters allowed heavy barges to sail directly to the foot of the Giza Plateau, bypassing miles of difficult land hauling. This is systems thinking at its finest. They didn't fight the environment, they synchronized their construction schedule with the planet's orbit. They used the flood as a massive, natural hydraulic lift. While the water covered the fields, the stones rose. When the water receded, the workers went back to their crops, and the core team of master masons took over the precision work. But speed was nothing without accuracy. You can't just throw 2.3 million blocks together and hope they meet at a point 480 feet in the air. On the Giza Plateau, mistakes were not allowed. And on the rare occasion they happened, they were caught, analyzed, and corrected. We often think of ancient people as primitive, but their quality control was as rigorous as a modern aerospace firm. We know this because the pyramids themselves are a record of their corrections. Evidence of adjustments archaeologists and engineers studying the structure have found. Recut stones, blocks that were partially installed, found to be out of alignment, and then trimmed in situ to restore the perfect line. Shifted blocks, evidence of stones being levered and shimmed with thin layers of mortar to account for microscopic settling in the foundation. Corrected angles, if a surveyor noticed a deviation of even a fraction of a degree, the next layer of stone was adjusted to compensate. This obsession with quality is why the Great Pyramid is still the most accurately aligned building on Earth. It's why the base is level to within less than an inch across 13 acres. It wasn't because they were perfect, it was because they were disciplined. The Egyptians didn't have computers to check their work, but they had the royal cubit and the thmerkit. They had a culture where good enough was an insult to the gods. Every block was a signature. Every joint was a prayer. They proved that with enough organization and an uncompromising standard of quality, a society can build something that doesn't just last for a lifetime, but for the rest of human history. We have to ask, could a civilization really sustain this effort for decades? The answer is a resounding yes, because Old Kingdom Egypt was perhaps the most stable society in human history. Political stability. Unlike the fractured city-states of Mesopotamia or the warring tribes of Europe, Egypt was a fortress protected by geography. No major wars. For centuries, the surrounding deserts acted as natural shields, preventing foreign invasions. Unified kingdom. Under the pharaoh, there was no internal competition. One god king, one voice, one goal. Calculate exactly how much grain they would have years in advance. Why pyramid construction eventually ended. After the Old Kingdom, the golden era of pyramid building began to fade, and eventually, the practice declined entirely. The mountain-sized monuments that once defined Egypt's horizon were replaced by something much more discreet. Economic strain. Building a Great Pyramid was essentially a national bankruptcy project. Sustaining that level of resource diversion for centuries eventually bled the treasury dry. Weakened central authority. As the power of the pharaohs fractured, the ability to mobilize 30,000 workers vanished. Increased tomb robbing. This was the breaking point. The pyramids were too visible. They were essentially giant, dig here, signs for looters. No matter how many granite plugs or false passages the architects used, the treasure inside was too tempting. Ultimately, the state made a strategic pivot. They shifted to hidden burials in the Valley of the Kings. Have you ever thought about what the pyramids reveal about humanity, our ability to organize, to believe, and to endure? Do they show that shared purpose and patience can surpass technology, allowing ordinary people to build something powerful enough to challenge time itself? They are a physical manifestation of what happens when a species stops fighting itself and starts moving in one direction. They show what is possible when belief aligns with power, a nation unified by a single spiritual purpose. Resources align with leadership, a bureaucracy capable of feeding and housing tens of thousands. Knowledge aligns with patience, a culture that refused to rush, choosing to measure in generations rather than days. The stones are heavy, but they are silent. Stone does not move itself. People do. Every inch of the Great Pyramid was paid for in human sweat, human planning, and human willpower.